previous parts of this lecture, we've looked at Xu Jing, Sogung, the writer of the illustrated account of Koryo, the Koryo Dokyong. We've looked at what he wrote about, why he was there. Now it's time to take a more critical look at the reliability of the report, the difference between the report and Koryo reality. And in order to do this, I think it's important to understand the notion of sinocentrism of the writer, the Song official who wrote it, the notion ingrained in him, apparently, if you read the book, it's quite clear, that the ultimate standard for anything is Chinese. And in this sense, this is a way to contextualize also the writing of Sogung or Xu Jing on Koryo, and to understand the Kaoli Tujing in its proper context. In order to fully understand the arguments made in the book, or the descriptions and the choices of the writer, it is important and it really helps if you have some background knowledge about Koryo's relation with the song, which wasn't there, didn't exist. There was just a commercial relation, and there was a potential interest in establishing a political relation, and Koryo's diplomatic relations with the northern states. It used to have, for a century or so, a very profitable relationship with the Liao state, but that Liao state had since disappeared. It had partly been conquered, and it had been replaced by the Jurchen Jin, and it hadn't quite come to terms with that fact at this moment in time, 1123, when this book was written. So that's the background to the book, and it has a bearing on the reliability of the book, because the same geopolitical situation, of course, played out for the Song dynasty. And if you want a definition or a pictorial definition of what sinocentrism is like, well, take a look at this map for the 15th century, which is supposed to be, I guess, a picture of the known world, but it misses the entire north of what would now be northeast China, or the what used to be called Manchuria, where the Liao and Jin dynasties had their origin in the largest swath of territory. It's not even there. So this is very much the Chinese gaze that you see here. Koryo is there, because Koryo was usually seen as a redeemable country. Yes, they were barbarians, but at least they wrote classical Chinese, literary Chinese, and you could, if you couldn't talk to them, you could at least converse with them in writing, and they were kind of civilized, and perhaps they could become fully civilized. But that's the sinocentrist background to also a text like the illustrated record of Koryo. Now, I've mentioned in the previous lectures the Hua-Yi dichotomy, the dichotomy between the notion of the cultured Chinese and the uncivilized or uncultured barbarians. The Song, of course, would be the cultured Chinese, and Koryo would be the more or less uncivilized barbarians. And the illustrated account of Koryo has plenty of examples, like this one, where this comes quite clearly to the fore. This is a description of a temple, and the temple apparently has an inscription reading, "Long live the Emperor of Song." And it continues, at least the book continues, not the inscription, looking at such devoted praise, it seems that it must have come from a sincere mind. Thus it is only natural that they, the temple's Korean patrons, are showered with the favors and affection of the imperial court. So that's the Song court. So this is very clear that as long as Koryo recognizes the superior culture of the Song state and the superior presence or even existence of the Song emperor, everything is fine. But not everything is fine, because this book also contains passages like this. This is a description starts with a description of Koryo armor. The upper and lower part of their armor is joined together, looking as if they are sewn or tucked in. Now, so far so good, but then it continues. Their appearance is very odd. They wear gold flower decorated hats that are almost 2 feet high. That's about this much, I guess. Brocade clothes and blue robes with a loose waist that covers the legs. The people of this country are of dwarf-like stature. That's not a very nice thing to say. So they especially add high hats and brocade clothing to make their appearance more robust. I have here drawn each of them with names and colors and lined them up further below. Now, as I mentioned before, unfortunately, and it's whenever I read about it, it saddens me, but we don't have the illustrations anymore. Although if you read this text, you can, I think, wonder how sincere and how realistic the illustration would be, because this is not a prime example of what we would probably consider objective or at least transparent description. So there is, on the one hand, a tendency on the part of the writer, Xu Jing, to praise when Koryo tries to be Chinese, like the song. And there, of course, there are very many different ways of being Chinese. It's not like that's one defined thing, and the song are just one way of being, well, song Chinese rather than Chinese, if such a thing exists. But if they try to be like the song, you can see that there's praise for them. And if they're not, and apparently in the way they wear their clothes, or the kind of clothes they wear, armor, they don't look like the song, or they don't want to look like the song. And they immediately are like they have dwarf-like stature, which contrasts sharply with the description, for example, Kim Bu-shik, who was of tall stature. Now, of course, it is possible that Kim Bu-shik was the tallest man in Koryo, but well, I'll leave that to you. It doesn't sound very logical to me. Important thing here is the very clearly made difference between Hua, cultured Chinese, and Yi, uncultured barbarians. But there may be hope. Even if they're uncultured, they may become cultured. If we look here, and here it talks about Koguryo, but Koguryo is, well, the old name, it's the name for the old northern Manchurian, Korean Manchurian state from which Koryo took its name. So, and often in Chinese sources you'll see Koguryo referred to as Koryo, because it was shorter to write probably, and Koryo sometimes referred to as Koguryo, because it wasn't always clear whether the Koguryo hadn't just morphed into Koryo. It hasn't. I mean, they're completely different states. But I can imagine that for a 12th century Chinese historian intellectual, this wasn't always clear. Now, and this is an enumeration of all the things it did well. It's a sea island. Well, it's a peninsula really, but well, let's just pass over that. It's separated by the waves from China, and not within the 9 vassal states of Zhou, which is a classical description of China proper, the traditional classical China. Yet they received the correct calendar, honored Confucianism, and harmonized their music and notes. And it goes on. So this is again is praise, because apparently Koryo can be civilized and it is interested in being civilized. It's interested in writing, in standardizing letters, in transport, etc. So again, maybe there is hope for Koryo. But this is not just about the song writing about Koryo, it's also about Koryo presenting a picture to the song. And one of the things that, in which the writer of this book, Xu Jing, is consistently wrong, or more wrong than other parts of the book, is the list of rulers that he includes, which is important if you want to have a more historical understanding of Koryo. So there are kings in there that have never reigned in Koryo, that don't exist. There are fake reign periods. For example, Hyunjong is an important example, who faked his own death towards the Liao, but it seems like perhaps from the Koryo side they didn't feel completely comfortable with the Song court knowing everything about the situation in Kaegyeong, the capital of Koryo. So they might have fed Xu Jing information that was just plainly wrong or not up to date. So the book was clearly written by Xu Jing, by a Song official, and yet there is a sense of Koryo agency within the book as well. There perhaps is a reason, I mentioned this before, why so little was known about Koryo in the Song, because the Koryo didn't want too many things to be known, so they would be very reticent about certain details, I can imagine, and then in other cases they would just plainly give the wrong kind of information. Everything to be not fully known. The book also contains descriptions of, for example, somebody who here is called Wang He. Wang being the name, the royal surname of the royal family. But Wang He was the person who, after his death, became known as King Inzong, the king who reigned from 1122 to 1146, roughly coinciding with the most important part of the career of Kim Bu-shik. And in 1123, he had been on the throne for only 1 year, and this is when the Song embassy arrived in Koryo. And here Yi Chakyom is mentioned, who was the rival, I guess, to Kim Bu-shik, of the most powerful and certainly the richest great family, Moonbol of Koryo. The father-in-law twice of the Koryo king as well, Inzong. And here is a description of him which looks very classical if you look at it, praise and blame historiography in a very orthodox way. But again, this is important because in 1122, Inzong had just been on the throne for 1 year. So whatever would happen between Koryo and Song in the coming years, chances were that the ruler of Koryo would still be Inzong. So this is somebody, again, who you want to know. And so a description of the ruler then was a sine qua non, an absolute condition for, I think, the success of this book in terms of its practical uses for the Song. Now, it's not just about rulers and important people, it's also about Koryoans themselves and their ways of life, their customs. And again, this is not bad at all. Koryo people generally can read books and understand the principles of civilized ways. Read Song Chinese ways that I, as a Song Chinese envoy, can recognize. Yet they also observe taboos according to yin-yang theories. Therefore, when constructing something in their country, it has to match the topography. Only when a location has been analyzed for a long time can it be chosen as a site for dwelling. Now, this is actually a very important and interesting reference to one of the most important ideologies of Koryo, something that in a different form still exists today, called Pungsujiri, geomancy, the art of reading the landscape, the knowing where to build a house, knowing how to build it, in what direction, where to build a city, where to build a fortress, where to place, construct a tomb for an ancestor. This is extremely important in the Koryo dynasty, and this is something obviously that was picked up on by Xu Jing. So he did, during his stay in Koryo, it wasn't very long, but he did apparently pay attention. This is also something which is interesting. Apparently in old classical Chinese history it is said that in Koryo people are usually very clean. It remains so to this day, writes Xu Jing. They always laugh about how dirty the Chinese are. And there is, and I guess we have to acknowledge here that Xu Jing did know some kind of, well, self-irony perhaps. It isn't very, very much present, but the fact that he does recognize the validity of Koryo criticism on Song Chinese civilization pleads in his favor, and it gives the book, well, not much, but a much slightly more balanced feel. But of course, it's not just about being clean, it's also about this. In the summer months they bathe again during the day. They gather in brooks and streams without separating men and women, and all leave their clothes and hats on the bank. They do not find it strange to undress in the middle of a stream. Again, the disapproval here is quite clear, and this refers back to an earlier passage of the book in which the loose morals of Koryo women in particular are remarked upon. So again, the Hua-Yi dichotomy, the implication, it isn't said out loud, but we all know, every Song reader will have known how to read this. This isn't how it is supposed to be. In a civilized country, men and women do not bathe naked in the same company. That's the again the Hua-Yi dichotomy that shines through. Here is another piece of another short piece of text on the capital. the capital which was traditionally situated in Pyongyang. And here it's very much connected to Chinese history. And the implication here may not have been very welcome for some Kodio readers, which is the equating Pyongyang with one of the Han Chinese commanderies that used to exist before the Three Kingdoms even came into being, the Nangnang or Leilang commandery, founded by Emperor Wu of Han. And later the seat of the Protector General established by Emperor Gaozong. And this refers to the conquest of Baekje and Goguryeo by Silla with the help of the Tang dynasty. Emperor Gaozong was the Tang emperor who was responsible for that. So this is a way of indirectly really claiming Kodio history, which is something you see a lot in Chinese writings of this period. So, I hope you have an idea of what the Gaoli Tujing is about. We've discussed the motives of the writer, the geopolitical background, the contents of the book itself. And in this last part we have discussed a way or several pitfalls that you will encounter when you read the book. So as a result, the keywords are limited, but each of them is very important. First of all, the book itself, the Gaoli Tujing. This is all about the book. Then about Sinocentrism, or a particular way of a concrete expression of this, the Hua-Yi dichotomy, the dichotomy between cultured Chinese and uncultured, uncivilized barbarians. And even though it is quite clear and sometimes explicitly stated that Kodioans aren't the worst of the barbarians you can encounter, they aren't fully Song Chinese either. So there is an implied hierarchy in terms of civilization in which Song Chinese civilization is highest, and then under Song Chinese civilization come the other civilization, or they're not really civilizations, but barbarian ways of living together, I'm not sure what to call that. As for a barbarian civilization, the Kodioans they are doing pretty well, but still, they're not fully Song Chinese. So this way of looking at Kodio is important. Also because this Sinocentrist view, the Hua-Yi dichotomy, was applied to Kodio, but also to Liao and Jin, which meant that there is a risk of underestimating some states or communities or groups that you think are not as developed as you are. And this is exactly what Song would do, and this is exactly what Kodio told them not to do. Kim Bu-sik himself told the emperor, or at least representatives of the emperor, do not trust the Jin. Do not think you can deal with them because they will eat you alive. And that's exactly what happened. And the notion of Sinocentrism, I think, was operative here in the underestimation of Kodio, but also of Liao and Jin, that was endemic in the Song view of its neighbors to the east. And then two other keywords that are related here: reality versus misunderstanding. So the reality, as Kodioans would have seen it, was different from the reality as the Song envoys saw it. And this again is the distortion occasioned by the Sinocentrist view of the writer. But then again, there's also a personal, of course, individual component, in the sense that no matter how objective you try to be, you can never be fully objective. And you will also always bring your own civilization, upbringing, context with you when you look at a different civilization. So there is a mismatch between the reality and between how that reality has been represented in the Gaoli Tujing, resulting in misunderstandings, in misreadings, in disapproval, sometimes in approval. But most importantly, I think, it has resulted in an underestimation of the notion that even if you're not fully Sinified, Kodio wasn't fully Sinified and wasn't looking to be fully Sinified, Liao and Jin weren't fully Sinified, that doesn't mean you cannot reach, or you cannot be as successful, even more powerful than fully Sinified states, or the states that invented or inherited Sinitic civilization like the Song state. I think I'll conclude my lecture here.